We are honored to have the chairman of the session, Lieutenant General P.C. Katoch, PVSM, UISM, AVSM, SC, former DGIS Indian Army. May also request the other distinguished panelists for the session, Major General R.P. Bhadran, ADG IS Indian Army, Mr. Raghavan Muralidharan, CTO, Tata SED, Colonel Gil Maos, Senior Director, C4ISR, Elbit Systems Land and C4I Limited, Colonel Richard Sundaram, General Manager, NIIT GIS Limited, and AVM retired Dev Ganesh, Customer Business Manager, Space Honeywell, to join us on the session. Yeah, may I hand over the session to the session chair?
What we are supposed to start?
Yeah, he says, hand over to you.
Hand it over to you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I don't see much of a change from previous seminars, and the usual thing is after lunch, 50% vanish. What we're going to discuss in this session is emerging network-centric technologies. Now, the relationship between information and combat is age-old. But what is happening is that information has now increasingly become a strategic asset. The challenge always is how to maximize intelligence. You have a NCW capable force. It permits you to share a common operational picture, which results in sharing of very high situational awareness between entities which are well informed and widely dispersed, and this is permitted by information technology. Now, NCW is actually a response of the entire gamut of the military, organizations, policies, blah, blah, blah. But here we're going to discuss only technologies. NCW is important because in times of criticalities, specifically which are dealing with national security, you really don't have any break. You cannot have a break in downtime. Now, the Indian military has been in the pursuit of NCW for a very long time. And over the years, you've had a lot of similar seminars and sessions. But this time is slightly different. And I think that is because you have a Prime Minister whose focus is optimization of technology, who has told the Unified Commanders Conference that he would like to see a digitized military. And he is talking of make in India, sell anywhere. How fast that happens, one doesn't know. But if you read in between the lines, the newspapers of yesterday, specifically Times of India, page number 17, you will find that FDI in defense above 49% is very much acceptable in state-of-the-art projects. And as far as I know, it has already happened in the joint development of military transport aircraft and helicopters. Another thing I like to talk about is the growing irregular threats that India is facing and is likely to face in the future. So when we are looking at emerging technologies, we should also be looking at technologies like targeting, say, infiltrators through thick foliage, taking them out from UAVs through the air, and similarly targeting terrorist activities within the countries. Now, we have a panel today of 5 very distinguished speakers who are going to make their presentations. I will request that they stick to the time which has been allotted to them. We first have Major General R.P. Bhadran, who's the ADG Information Systems of the Indian Army. He is a December 1979 Commission Armored Corps officer who's commanded a cavalry regiment and a cavalry brigade. He's done Colonel GS wargaming at RTRAC. He's done Colonel GS of our Strike Corps. He's been Deputy Director of CV R&D. He's been Commandant of Wardeck. And he's a recipient of 2 Chief of Army Staff Commendation cards. As the ADGIS, he's been charged with conceptualizing, development, and implementation of the operational information systems, management information systems, and the geographical information system. So over to General Badran.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be speaking on this subject of compressing the OODA loop. Firstly, OODA, which stands for Observe, Orient, Decide and Act, is a theory postulated by Colonel John Boyd. So it's also called the Boyd cycle. He postulated this theory based on his experience in the Korean War and published his first paper in 1973. The basic theme of the theory is that every action of ours is preceded by a series of mental processes. And these mental processes is identified as observe, orient, and decide. And the postulation is that an individual and organization that can go through a successful consecutive OODA loop, that is observe, orient, and decide and act, faster than the opponent will win the conflict in the military context. And in the military context, what is to be understood is that you go through successive cycles till the time you achieve success. And another principle of Boyd's cycle is that rapid OODA looping resets the opponent's OODA loop by causing confusion. It sends him back to square one. That is, before he gets into the decision and act part of the OODA cycle, you have changed the situation for him so that he trips back to his observe state again before he can act. The situation is changing very fast for him. And as we'll see as I go along, these terminologies do have very close and strong correlation with the traditional tactical terminologies we've been using. As we go along, we'll see that. There are two things which need to be done before I get into compressing the OODA loop. Firstly, we have to get into the same plane of understanding of what the OODA loop is and what its constituents mean. So I'll spend about 6 odd minutes on that, and then 7 minutes for discussing as to how it can be compressed. That takes us to 13 minutes, and the rest 2 minutes I already covered in the preamble. So 15 minutes I'll take. So in the observe, in the intelligence parlance, it is a combination of collect and collate in the INT cycle, that is collection, collation, interpretation, synthesis, and dissemination. That's the INT cycle we are talking about in our army. So this is observe means it's a combination of collect and collate. The problem in observation, that is in the collection and collation of information, is often in war, the information you get is exaggerated, incomplete, or incorrect, or all three. And this is what Clausewitz refers to as the fog of war. The cause of fog of war is the information you get is not complete or accurate. That's the first impediment which causes a delay in decision making. So the second impediment in the observe cycle state itself is the inability to share information fast. You may have information, but you can't share. Like for example, good old days we didn't have sensors. So we had information coming from our sources deployed or when he's on your back. at that time, information was one agency and that agency used to disseminate. Today, the situation is slightly different because at every level, as you can see in the slide, there are certain sources of information available, sensors. It can be radar sensors, optical sensors, or even human sources, agents. You have satellite imagery, you have unmanned aerial vehicles, all kind of sensors are there. And these sensors provide information to the headquarters which deploys them or utilize them at every level. The problem is that this information is confined to that headquarters in real time. It doesn't get disseminated in real time. So this part of it going down from one headquarter to another is absent. It doesn't happen in real time. So every headquarter is taking a decision based on incomplete information. So there is no homogeneity of understanding of the battle space. That is one of the disadvantages. This also causes a delay. The second is the orient part of the OODA. This can be correlated with the process of interpretation and synthesis in the INT cycle. And as per Boyd, this is the Schwerpunkt of OODA cycle, that is the focal point of OODA cycle. So I'll deliberate a bit more on this. Orientation is hindered, according to him, by perceptions, that is denial. You refuse to accept an input because it is not fitting into your mindset, into your pattern of thinking. If I had to give an example, invasion of Burma by Japanese. A month ago, before the Japanese invaded, a detailed appreciation of the threat, the magnitude of threat, and the force levels required to combat that and resist that was given to the Southeast Asian Command. But it was not accepted on the premise that a land offensive is not possible from the east, and the Japanese Navy is not powerful enough to have a cross-sea invasion because the war is still raging in Singapore. And a month later, the Japanese actually invaded Burma. A second example, if I had to give you, is a little later, Normandy landing. June 5th and 6th night, the coastal surveillance detachments across the English Channel, west of France, reported tens and thousands of ships crossing the English Channel. So he reported the unit. He was told the Americans and the British put together do not have that much ships. And it was not accepted. And come 6 morning, 4 o'clock, the ships landed in the landing bases in France. So you tend to ignore valuable inputs because it is not fitting into your pattern of thinking. The next is emotional filtering. Now, after having rejected when it happens, you say, God, it cannot happen. And that is what happened at 4 o'clock in the morning on 6th of June. There's another aspect to it which I'll come to later. And the third aspect of orientation problem is fatigue. After 3 days of sleepless night fighting battle and doing the staff work, your faculties are not in their best. So you tend to ignore related aspects and possibly take wrong decisions. So these also cause certain delays. Now, having covered these two, the rest two is, I think there will not be any problem of understanding those things. Delay in decision. Once you have understood the intelligence as battle picture, then there is a requirement to understand your own situation, because after a few days of battle, you are not very clear of your own situation also, the disposition of your forces. Then planning is done sequentially. At the highest level, the orders are given to the next level and so on to the implementing agency. This also takes certain amount of time. Then delay in action. There is an information gap. What the commander understood as the status of his unit and the actual status of the unit may be different. This is especially so when the battle has been on for some time. Seeking and fixing the enemy. He has been told in vague terms as to where the enemy is and what his dispositions are. Physically seeking him and fixing him before engaging him in battle is a different ballgame. Then while the battle is on, he does not have real-time intelligence as to how the enemy is responding. All these cause delay in his actions. Now coming to how the OODA loop can be compressed. So let's take one by one. First is delay in collection. What we have in the net-centric environment is networked sensors. So what I showed you in every hierarchy having their own sensors working independently, that ceases to exist. You have the complete family of sensors in the tactical battle area networked. So any information which is picked up by one sensor is available to all. Second, the applications in net-centric systems are capable of using a higher resolution map data and optimally deploy these sensors in such a manner that you get maximum focus on your assess courses of enemy action, courses of the enemy. Because of all this, you will have homogeneity of inputs. There will not be any perceptual difference between one headquarter and another headquarter because everybody is getting the same information and analysis is similar. The applications are also capable of auto multi-sourcing. We all, in the intelligence parlance, we have a system of multi-sourcing. You don't take input from one source and say that that is happening. You recheck by having employing another source. So in net-centric systems, you have a feature of auto multi-sourcing for critical inputs. And then real-time sharing of information. With all these things, these three impediments to a shorter OODA loop gets neutralized. I purposefully left the first two incompletely scored out because the information is never completed. So it would be incorrect to say that information, we'll have complete information about the enemy. So this problem gets partially solved through networking and net-centric applications. Next is that delay in orientation. We discussed that impediments are denial, emotional filter, and fatigue. Now what happens in a net-centric system is it has got this facility of data fusion. The information coming from different sources are fused in time and space to give a coherent picture of what the enemy activity is all about. Then autocorrelation. To give you an example, one sensor detected, say, an armored concentration. You suspect possibly there is an offensive by armor from there. Now that cannot happen unless there are certain related activities also detected. For example, there has to be an artillery concentration. And if that armor offensive is coming across an obstacle, there has to be certain amount of engineering experience, bridging experience, and trawling experience which has to be there. So the system prompts the commander to look for this. Knowing where the original location is, you look for that, and unless this complete pattern emerges, it doesn't confirm that there is a possibility of that course happening. With this, a holistic analysis of the battle space is carried out. And lastly, the computers do not know emotion and fatigue. So they continue to work and dispassionately. So this also gets negated to a very great degree through automation. Next comes the delay in decision making. We discussed that the lack of knowledge on the exact situation of our own forces in terms of their disposition and strength, the sequential planning with the hierarchical planning, and dissemination delays. Now, in a network system, we have real-time situational awareness of our troops. You don't have to seek. It is in front of you in the digital map. Second, as was mentioned in the morning, net-centric applications permit collaborative planning. That is, if you are trained for that, as the situation is in front of you, situation of the enemy and your situation of your own forces are in front of you, trained commanders at all levels can do a tentative planning together rather than waiting for orders to come. And whatever planning is done, it is instantly disseminated to all concerned. Real-time dissemination of plans. So this sequential planning and sequential dissemination, the time required for that is considerably reduced. So this also turns into green. And lastly, action. The information gap on the enemy. Seeking and fixing him and the real-time intelligence. Here again the situational awareness, the complete int picture is in front of everybody who's supposed to act. And there is continuous intelligence provided, provided you have sensors in terms of steady look satellites or say rotary wing UAVs and that nature. If you have sensors, you can have a continuous monitoring of the battle space, and that feed also comes to the commander who's, so for him to seek and fix the enemy becomes much easier. And because of continuous surveillance of the battle space, he'll get continuous feedback on how the enemy is responding to his maneuvers. So this is a manner in which we can compress the OODA cycle in the battle space. And here, while the network is important because real-time sharing of information is through the network, the most critical component is the application software which does part work for the commander to do the synthesis and interpretation part of intelligence so that he can take a complete correct decisions in battle. Well, gentlemen, this is how net-centric warfare systems compress the OODA loop. I finished, sir.
Thank you, General Badran. Very comprehensive presentation on compressing the OODA loop. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Mr. Raghavan Muralidharan. He is the CTO, Tata Power SCD, senior member of IEEE. He is a system engineer professional in computer and communication engineering for the past 32 years. He was an IEEE ComSec standard board member during 2008-2010 and vice director of IEEE Communication Society's Asia Pacific region. At SCD, he's been responsible for design and development of mission-critical real-time solutions for Indian Defense Forces. In 1987, Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi invited him to be a member of the distinguished Young Titans team. He's been actively involved in the two MAKE programs of TCS and BMS for Tata Power SCD. He's going to speak on Blue Force tracking and situational awareness. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Respected Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all of you. Morning session and the session before me, you heard of what is NCW, what is OODA loop, and all the components that go into the a BMS kind of system. So my task here is to share with you the challenges that we see in the Blue Force tracking and the situational awareness, trying to give a broader perspective and the challenges in that. So let's look at what is a Blue Force requirement, Blue Force tracking requirement. One is to display the location of all friendly entities within the area of interest. And as General Badran put it, we need to do it in near real time or as quick as possible. Then this information needs to be updated in near real time. So this is a dynamic, continuous situation. As he put it, if you do it too fast and then confuse the enemy, then there is a lot of confusion happening. There can be a deadlock. So it has to be at the right time, the right interval. And once you have the information, then you have to exchange the Blue Force tracking information across the hierarchies and affiliations of the service. Right? So what is this situation awareness functionality? We saw what this blue force tracking is. Yeah, it's search simply, but I'll try to explain it as we go ahead in the next slides. The situation awareness functionality is picked up from the observed enemy inputs, then the observed threats, and the observed terrain inputs. Okay? When you talk about the enemy inputs, we're talking about providing the capability to display enemy-related inputs, which we pick up through radio, radars, all sort of sensors that we have in the field. Then once you have picked up a certain information, then we have to keep it tracked. In the sense, you should know if you have seen an aircraft, this is the same aircraft that came from in this direction. We should be able to track the position of the aircraft movement, or a tank movement, or a troop movement, whatever be the case. So every entity has to be tracked, and that should form part of the situation awareness. That gives you a better awareness of the situation rather than just saying that at this point of time, here is a tank. This tank started from here, it moved through this path, and now it is at this point in time here. So as you put it, we have to track it in position and space, time and space. Then the observed threats enable the user to mark threats such as IED, mines, booby traps, etc. Again, with the help of sensors, we should be able to picturize them on the situation awareness map. Then the assigned danger area preferred by the user to each threat. For example, the threat may not be very wide. It could only cause a threat for a particular area of interest. So we should be able to identify those kind of areas and say, okay, this threat will really pose a danger to us if it comes within so much of a distance or so much of a angle or whatever that is required. Then the observed terrain inputs provide capability to add terrain attributes so as to display latest terrain information on the system and generate alerts accordingly. As the DGIS told us in the morning, it has to be a push technology and not a pull technology. The soldier in the field is not going to ping the system and ask, oh, is there a threat? Is there something going to happen or not? It has to be appropriately alerted and with the right priority pushed to the user in the right time. While talking about the BFT and the SA, now how do we generate these two things? Okay, as General Badran put it, you have to collect them, observe and acquire or collect the data from various sensors and other information systems. Then you have to use a data fusion engine and fuse them together. And then you get, the blue force tracking and the SA, situation awareness. Is it that easy? Not at all, right? The data flow, okay, there is something missing in the, okay, you first acquire them, then you start fusing them, then you start distributing or disseminating them in the right places, and then you also consume the situation awareness of the blue force tracking for your own use. So every node, every entity in the battlefield is doing this in a cooperative manner or a collaborative manner. So that's where the challenges come up. Sorry, some of the animation is not working, maybe because of the version number here. Anyway, the sensor inputs is one critical thing that the blue force tracking and the SA has to acquire. For the blue force tracking, you need to produce your own location and share it with the neighbors or neighboring entities. You can take your own location from a GPS or a GNSS system, or using an IFF, you can find out the location of your friend, or you can use inertial navigation system like PNS on a soldier, or use the radio communication devices using the time of arrival or received signal strength to arrive at the location of a friendly entity. Or there are additional sensors in the battlefield, such as the battlefield surveillance radars, the unmanned ground sensors, the image sensors like the electro-optical systems or the image infrared and thermal sensors, or you get intelligence inputs through operational posts, etc. So the challenges in the acquisition, which will create delays in acquisition or delays in the observe kind of thing, is about information from self-reporting sensors are combined to form an aggregated self-position. Like you are, the one point is multi-sourcing, right? The moment you go for multi-sourcing, you want to assign confidence level to each of the input that you are receiving, and then you have to aggregate your self-position. It's not that easy to say that I know my position very well, or I can exactly say my position and share that or disseminate that with the neighboring entities. It needs a good amount of processing to give it very accurately. The GPS, GNSS alone may not be enough. At times it may not be even available. So additional sensors are required for a reliable blue force tracking. However, the additional inertial sensors introduce challenges related to varied technology. You will have various types of inertial navigation systems, PNS, and then carrying all of them on a soldier is also going to be very difficult because it's going to be heavy. Apart from being heavy, it needs additional power. Swap and accuracies are very important. So what kind of accuracy can you have in a PNS or a personal navigation system that you can carry, which is using gyros and accelerometers, is a big question. So with all that, what we are trying to say is that, look, even assessing your own position and disseminating the information to your friendly entities is going to be a challenging task. So choice of the right sensor, the right processing, the right accuracies, and all that is required even at the starting point of the BFT. For the situational awareness, you need to have the current sensors are standalone entities in the field. So you need to worry about, again, the sensor integration. So in the morning, we heard that the intelligence is going towards the edge of the battlefield. So rather than sending raw data across and processing it as a central server, can we do this processing in a distributed fashion? Can we filter the data, only send the reliable information or processed information from an edge to the higher authorities or higher echelons? For that, we need to have some amount of computing power at each and every node or every edge device. And second problem here is, if you are trying to send a lot of amount of data up in the network, the bandwidth that is required and the communication overloads will be very heavy. So two reasons we should be able to do it locally. With the local intelligence and local situation awareness, can you process the data in a better fashion and send minimal amount of packets to the network upwards, so that a data fusion or the next step can happen in a faster manner? So one is the sensor. How do we decide what kind of pre-processing required for every sensor data? So what do you put inside a sensor so that it sends the correct data up in the network? So that's a major challenge to work out and decide. Then comes, what kind of network do you have? So if you have a very good network, you can afford to send data quickly, the raw data. But if the network is poor and it has poor bandwidth, then you need to process more data at the edge and send the processed data upwards, right? So what I'm trying to share here is, all this is not straightforward. You need to have the holistic system in picture to come up with each of the subsystems, right? So it's not that you can palm off the jobs as, okay, you do situational awareness, you do blue force tracking, you do sensor integration. So all of them cannot be done in an isolated manner. You need to have a holistic picture of what is going to happen and optimally design each subsystem and its interface and what processing at each entity has been carried out. Okay. Now, that was about collecting data from the sensors, right? The next is, once you have collected data from the sensors, now you need to do a data fusion. Okay. So you are getting data from various sources, the so-called multi-sourcing concept in battlefield. So you have to worry about kinematic fusion. Okay, the position, the velocity, all have to be taken into account. Then you have to worry about attributes. What type of vehicle is it? What kind of strength of, what is the kind of strength of that entity? Things like that. So all this have to be fused in one area or on one entity. Now we'll come to see, can it be done across? Has the data fusion to be happening in one central system, or does it have to be distributed? So there's no question, it cannot be a centralized system in a battlefield. It has to be in a distributed fashion. So identifying the best sensor at any instant in time for an appropriate fusion is a very complex challenge. Because the sensors do not behave same way throughout the day or throughout the year. Okay? In different terrains and different climatic conditions, they behave differently. Okay, so we have to understand that characteristics of each sensor before we use a sensor data as more reliable than another one for fusing purposes. So in short, we would say that a situational awareness which uses a data fusion engine has to be distributed and it has to be heterogeneous. It has to have a non-temporal kind of thing. The sense, it cannot say that I will only fuse data made available from every sensor at the same instant of time. You are getting data from one sensor at time t1 and another sensor for same amount of kind of information another time t2. So you have to correlate this t1 and t2 temporarily and say that, okay, this is the same kind of position is going to get or same kind of awareness. And in the battlefield, your energy is very, very less in the sense, not the human, not the soldier energy, but the equipment energy. You have to use it from the batteries. The batteries cannot be recharged quite often in the battlefield. So you'll have to, all your computation, your communication, etc., all have to be energy efficient. In other words, you don't have all the computing power and time to do. Time, of course, you don't have. We have seen that you have to compress the OODA loop as much as possible. But can you do the maximum amount of processing that you need to do? You may not be able to be having that luxury in the battlefield. Okay, you have to make all your computations power aware. Now comes, okay, assume that we have cracked the problem of acquiring the data from various sensors, fusing them properly and creating all these things, provided there was a proper communication network that through which you could disseminate and share information. Here again, we have not talked about the security of this information. We have not talked about the authenticity of this information coming to you. Beware, the enemy has a AW system. He can inject data for you to confuse you. So how to filter out those data we have still not seen. That's another bigger challenge that we need to be worried about. Okay, assuming that it's all a friendly system, nobody is going to inject or spam data into you, and it's all digitized battlefield, right? The moment you talk about digitized battlefield, you can inject a lot of malware into it. The enemy himself can inject a lot of data as if he's your friend, and you'll get wrong information or wrong situational awareness. Okay, we are assuming that we have not yet come to that complexity. There's a major complexity that we need to understand and be aware of, like in a commercial world. The challenges in communication are the battlefield is not having a RF environment which is steady and good. First of all, the enemy is going to target you, and like we talked about the electronic bomb or electronic bomb and the AW mechanisms, the communication bandwidth available in a edge of the battlefield is going to be very, very poor. The adversary will endeavor to degrade the communication links both by physical destruction as well as by electronic means. Okay, so the assumption is, yes, it's not going to be a good situation for you to communicate, especially in wireless communication. The communication is, the battlefield communication characteristics are, it will be wireless with RF limitations on, because of the RF power, you cannot pump more power. The moment you pump more power in the battlefield, you know that you'll be detected. So you will try to keep your RF power as low as possible, and it's a noisy environment. So these are two contradicting requirements. Then it's going to be mobile. Soldier and entities in the battlefield are not going to be static, they'll be mobile. So you have to take into account that mobility. Then the bandwidth is heavily constrained, and the RF environment is prone to disruptions and disconnections, right? So this brings in two things. One is, once you're disconnected, you want to connect back to your friendly network. What are the authentication required? How much time will it take? How much power it will consume? What multiple levels of authenticity have to be incorporated to make you join back your friendly network? These are all again major challenges that we need to worry about and solve. So communication solution to support an efficient data transfer of blue force tracking and situational awareness is a must. Now, here comes the new concept. Can we do with existing technologies? Can you marry all the existing technologies piecemeal and put them together to create a system? The answer is no. You should understand each and every sensor. You should understand each and every communication link. You should understand the terrain on your working. You should have multiple profiles for various kind of terrains. The equipment is deployed initial few minutes. It may have to understand the terrain, environment, etc., like some kind of cognition. and understand and create a profile of its own. Say, okay, this is the best profile. It works here. Maybe do some test communication between friendly entities and create a profile for the current environment, current location or current terrain, and then start working the best way to communicate. Okay, so now, most radios assume, or most communication entities assume standard things. So standard radios cannot work here, right? Because they need special kind of interfaces. You need a better middleware to communicate between radio and application. And this has to be fine-tuned for various kind of terrains. So one middleware and one protocol working in one terrain may not work. And this is where the SDRs and the cognitive radios that may quite help, because with software changes we can do the changes in the characteristics of the communication devices itself. And then comes the challenges in consumption. Okay, this is the ACT part of the OODA loop. We need to, apart from the BFT and the SA that you have, you got your Blue Force tracking for your region within your area of interest. You are aware of the common operating picture in terms of the SA. So you need computing devices with a soldier with the right swap and form factors to do all these things. You need an intuitive and clutter-free representation of the picture, common operating picture, and the Blue Force tracking information. You need to support standard symbology. How do you represent a tank? How do you represent various entities? Should be standard and should be known easily to all the users. And you should have the right GIS tools for real-time and local algorithms queries, right? The GIS plays another important role here. If you don't have a good GIS, whatever information you have, you will not be able to represent and present it to the user in a friendly manner or in a useful manner. And all these tools cannot operate on a server-based centralized concept. Okay? The major disadvantage of a centralized concept is single point of failure. Second, the time taken to send your queries across a network, across a communication link, get back the data, the latency is too much, the delays are too much, right? So we can't afford that. So as far as possible, most things should be done locally for the ACT part of it. So in summary, I would like to share that the sensor integration, whether you need to do a pre-processing based on network characteristics, that decision has been taken very, in a very, different manner than what we do the regular systems of the battlefield. The systems have to be distributed, it has to be heterogeneous, and more than all that, it has to be energy efficient, a data efficient engine. The communication solution which understands the requirements of BFT and SA, which can change its profile based on these requirements, have to be engineered. The communication middleware, a solution to effectively handle the awareness data or dissemination in the battlefield, has to be worked out. And there has to be a lightweight, low footprint tactical GIS, which consumes least amount of computing power to help you present your BFT and SA, and also help you compute your local questions and give the answers. They should be available. So with that, sir, I conclude my session. Talk rather.
Thank you, Mr. Muralidharan. Very comprehensive presentation.